I'm Dylan's friend, and I'm very excited to introduce him tonight to all of you. Okay, I've known Dylan since 2017. We met at Accepted Students Day and have been sort of friends exchanging poetry ever since. Yeah, okay, so I wrote a little thing about Dylan's work and I'll just read it. Okay, quote, "Not what I would, that do I practice," end quote. So goes the epigraph, borrowed from the letters to the Romans that begins Dylan's recent poem, Love. The two clauses echo each other's structure as they twist toward their delayed verbal closures. I would, I practice. The structure preserves at once the affirmation in these phrases as it bends towards their negation. Not what I would, that do I practice. It's torturous to say and to process, harder than it has to be. When things like this happen in Dylan's work, and they often do, somehow in the twisting, there's a glimmer of something else. Maybe the affirmative possibility passing out of being, but winking as it does so. I think here of Adorno's point in aesthetic theory that the subject in a totally administered world can't appear or be expressed in art as anything other than the cipher of its own miscarried possibility. This quote from Romans, articulating the disjunct between action and conscious expression of will, is such a perfect epigraph for much of Dylan's work, suspicious as it is of agentive willing, looping through personae, tracking an I who comes recognizably into being at the moment it dissolves away again, almost totally imbricated with various kinds of inherited poetic and philosophical and economic and perceptual structures that organize its legibilities. Dylan's poems are simultaneously sly, sad, redolent of a Popian mannerism from a different era, post-Ashberian, clever, and yet always careful to preserve their openness to the world, which finds form in the poems often as a sweet and unexpected awkwardness, a genuine awkwardness, not stylized, not burnished into a style of its own. Reading Dylan's work, there is no doubt that he could make, of anything he wished, a finely burnished style. And indeed, there are many styles that flicker in and out of perceptibility in Dylan's poems. A high academic style, one where Diogenes, Ashbery, Marat, and Newton, for example, can be comfortable guests in some of its rooms. Sometimes a casual, chatty style. Sometimes a language math phenomenological style, one that picks up the tools of the language poets, and maybe some of Gertrude Stein's, quote, now one trembling star, now one, or, quote, like the way it's off and on again, like as in, end quote. These are poems interested in how the conditions for what can be said or believed in arise in a poem. Unsurprising, perhaps, that Dylan studies how belief works in literature through William James to Poe, Whitman, and Ashbery. Belief as something we know we have acceded to after we perform an activity whose precondition that belief must have been. In Dylan's poems, I so often find that I know I've held an expectation only after I've moved in a way enabled by it. Quote, one's waiting for one's job, not the same. Haircut on the god and statuary, though in both there is this movement. I'm looked up and down by my house and looked upon the crane's screenshot over Tokyo, end quote. Not just clever, interlinear, and a colothon, Dylan here moves me through truly different ways of being oriented and freezes me in the vertiginous stillness of the crane's screenshot over Tokyo, somehow the impossible but correct resolution to this tumble. I thought I knew where I was, but I did. Please join me in welcoming Dylan Furcall. I'm really excited to hear you read these poems.
That was just such a really, really lovely introduction, Kirsten. It will be, difficult to read after it. And also, it's such a pleasure to be here, such as here is with all of you. It's such a pleasure to be able to participate in this reading with Kirsten and with Emily, who is, whose work has been important to me for such a long time, who has also been important to me for such a long time as a friend and fellow traveler. So, okay, without further further thanks, they could go on. Well, except that thank you so much for Jess, Becca, Jeffrey, and all for organizing this and all of the other incredible readings in this series. So I'm going to start with a poem that, given that when I think of Emily, I also think of Ashbery, and it's such a connection between the two of us. Starting with a poem that has an epigraph from Ashbery's poem, How to Take a Bath. The epigraph is, how do I know this? People have told me that's how. And the poem is called Inveterate Bather. Surely it's this one. That's now clear, a contact lens resembling it. I knew my mother to collect them from their early days when they were different than from now. The snow gets put in heaps. In winter, there are birds above it. There were birds then also, howsoever different. Birds can share their feathers, analogy and hearing across genera. That's what gives a contract such that spruce might enter, though for years it has been broken, leaving us to suckle at its sapling. Diogenes is put to rest forever. We compare our notes, but cannot do the homework under sunlight. This is most unfortunate for handlers who leave us to be handled by ourselves. With nothing left to do, one enrolls in being miserable for credit. If the trees can do it, what is stopping them from following our suit? The birds? That's a bold suggestion. As if to say, one applies so that the other traps itself in plumbing. We are speaking once again of optics, and what they say is true. Marat would die to get things done. He couldn't stomach ice melt. This next poem is called Quiet Chatter. There's a world going on irrespective of slumber, but is it sleep actually, or did you know we might be coming by and thus put yourself in this declension, producing sentiments that all might eventually fall? Rotate the event and apprehend its cause, although the cause has less to tell than what hides underneath the bed. The hand grips itself. You are smooth as satin, which is more so and more remote. Whatever happened just escaped, left the window open, told us so. You do not need support, so this superannuated lilac is beautiful. It is helpful. Winter momenting. Something in the river fortress end shall spring regardless quantity. But why fabric, pistachio, turquoise? Why quality, not order? Only it's come to be puppies, like the pet. Say one wrong thing, you're dying. A beacon with one's missteps, 3 even. So you like the rustle, dried leaves can happen. So you like the rustle, dried leaves can still happen when wet. This next one is a little bit longer. It's in 3 parts. And it is called, the lengthy title, Requiring a God He Could Not Understand, Festooned. Actually, just give me 1 second. Change something with my screen. There we go. Okay. Requiring a God He could not understand, festooned. 1. Now prayer speaks prayer. The little fly glides up on it and settles to its heap. One detects a warmth possessing qualities of seasons, something similarly reasonable. Hi, I'm Bill. I'm here to sell you your TV. Where does it stop? This must be reckoned, just as lanterns hanging from the rafters. Really, it's not personal, just flashing, such as helmet headlights are in tunnel dwellings. So you've caught the act of having made predictions. Now who's to say who holds the Jack of Diamonds? Could such knowledge soon be pardoned? Being a king is hard, that much certainty ensures. The monsters in the very waves, some of them have not had lunch, have fallen, colorless as speculation only. It's the best we have. I speak for all of us. We're sorry for our service. It is difficult connecting. We have not been serviced and are sorry for it. It's troubling when you've expectations. and notice in the softness of the edges, the triangle particulate as blue against the cube, the sphere noble of proportion. But we've no more of that now, but no others. There was the sky, the need for satisfaction. We've had it more than personality knows. 2. When times I get the gist and others, rapidly approaching our confusion, the I, you, severance packages, practically they gobbled up the night and kept it in their satchel wallets. So it's you I need to find in this pervading blankness. Since I found you, where's the satchel, if not in the wallet? One's waiting for one's job, not the same haircut on the god and statuary, though in both there is this movement. I'm looked up and down by my house and looked upon. The crane screenshot over Tokyo. The sun was red and beautiful, though waterlogged. 3. You haven't, you've not. There are times, and for them seasons, mean are their suggestions, getting away from the wind, which picks up small conspiracies and dies. So much for music. Okay, now a couple short ones to end. The first one here is called the Finch, and that is spelled F-I-N-S-H. The Finch. That is a place, a pounce to start. The problem with a finch is that it will not misbehave. A problem? Follow your nose, Orpheus. A lure of redundancy, being plus more. It isn't the treasure that's owned, but Orpheus is owed his pounce of Finch. 1 pound. Space fixation can't resist the urge to double. Now one trembling star, now one, might keep it in one suitcase with the lozenges and not stop blinking. Though there's water damage in our future, one has got to hand that to another, like the way it's off and on again, like as in. And I'll end with the poem that Kirsten mentioned in her intro, Love, which, yeah, the epigraph coming from Romans. Not what I would, that do I practice. That there are thoughts, and for them seasons, this evening's given particularity. Often there is burn of the persimmon trees, of the park that everywhere is felt as conclusion, like the steam whistle once foretold, when one couldn't dig beneath the asphalt and be thus melt and spread. But that is obvious. Who built this? Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Those poems were amazing. And I love, you can hear the Ashbury connection so much in your poems, which in preparing this introduction for Emily, I'd been thinking about as well. The connection really between both of, in both of your work is almost palpable. So this is a really great pairing. So yeah, let me begin with my introduction of Emily, who I'm really excited to hear read tonight. In a 2019 review of Fort Knott, Nathaniel Rosenthalis, drawing on Cian Nye, identifies Emily Skillings' engagement with a distinct aesthetic category, which he refers to as the interesting. A 19th century inheritance, the interesting is characterized by a low intensity affect, a serial structure, and a sense of recursiveness. As Rosenthalis puts it, the work orients toward the future, and you desire to re-encounter it. This is certainly true of Fort Knott, where poems such as When I Was a Glacier begin in the mediated time of a Bruegel painting, only to throw 16th century sound all over a hyper-quotidian daybed. The title launches us into the future. Who wouldn't think of climate change with its impending doom? To which the poem returns in the final lines. Fail me, my distant mountain. Skillings not only manages such recursiveness with impeccable ease, but does so with a flattened feeling that permeates throughout the collection. In response to heightened sensation, for instance, Skillings deploys detached, almost clinical language. You relocate your teeth to the opposite nipple. I thought, in that moment, it's a brutal cave. Often, flattened affect contains significant tension, and this piece is no exception. Despite its apparent intimacy, the sex act reiterates the fraught gender dynamic at work elsewhere in the poem and throughout the collection as a whole. Skillings' more recent work maintains this effect while pushing toward new thematic directions. In fact, the poems seem more aware of their interestingness. The Duke's Forest, for instance, interrogates less the concept of nature, itself a subject of much debate, than the amplified and then deflated emotion experienced when the speaker encounters objects in the natural world. The poem begins, "I love nature, but I think it awakens in me intensely boring thoughts that in the moment seem deep ravines." It is only in retrospection that such thoughts, which might really be feelings, reveal themselves for the common and in fact mundane experiences they really are. In other words, where the earlier poems shirked those old Burkean categories, the beautiful and the sublime, the new poems attack them with a rhetorical bludgeon. In doing so, they upend the pervasive and in many ways troubling effects those big feelings exert on the so-called human nature divide. That said, I do not mean to suggest these poems are devoid of emotion. Quite the contrary, they feel deeply. No people in it, an elegiac poem dedicated to John Ashbery, seems to observe jackdaws flitting through the air like a kind of chafing thinking. Readers soon realize that, no, the jackdaw line is excerpted from Ashbery's book-length poem Flowchart, and rather than describe an experience of the actual woods, the poem records a process of reading. Until about 3/4 in, when it swerves toward more personal reflection. That's when I knew he was going away from me, towards the sound. Skillings continues, like the ring on the table, it can't be discentered. Rim around the recent. Ashes, ashes, a bright, tangled seeming. Mobilizing the stress pattern and alliteration of a familiar children's song, Ring Around the Rosy, Skillings conveys the essential finality of death while underscoring the speaker's own aversion to it. Death is not final, it is a seeming, or so the speaker wants it to be. What could be more human, and therefore more authentically felt, than a refusal to acknowledge the sheer facticity of death? It is with such tangled seemings in mind that I welcome Emily Skillings to the Holloway Poetry Series tonight. Her poems are smart, fluid, and unflinchingly constructed. They span themes ancient, modern, and in between. They are at points funny, frustrated, and deadly serious, as I'm sure you will find this evening. Please join me in welcoming Emily Skillings.
Thank you so much for that, John. That was incredible. And did you say that the new poem's bludgeon? Did you use the word bludgeon?
Yeah, I described them as a rhetorical bludgeon.
I really, that's a really, that's a high compliment. So thank you so much for that introduction. Dylan, that was an incredible reading. I feel so inspired by those poems. I wrote down in the last one, everywhere felt as conclusion. It was so beautiful. Thank you also so much to Jeffrey, Rebecca, and Jessica for having me for the Holloway series. And thanks so much to everyone, my sister's here, my best friend from high school's here, so many people I love and admire, so many friends here. So thanks for coming tonight. I'm recovering from COVID right now, so I've been looking forward to this all week because I've been kind of like shut in my room and so bored, watching television, as I was explaining before y'all got here. And so I'm really excited to see some faces and to actually have something to do. Um, I'm going to be reading from my new manuscript, which is tentatively titled "Ladies Be Your Own Grave," which there's an exclamation mark after the ladies. I'm going to start with a very short poem called "Rose Crowned Night Girl." I was in Gloucester this summer at a residency, and I saw a heron called a night heron, and it was so beautiful. And I wrote this poem. Rose Crowned Night Girl. I am pointless. This I come to know by pressing ear to night's machinery. Outside, the words rub each other until they are dull. Calibrate, resurface, surface, invest, investigate, snowy, open, environ, woman, wooden, system. I look where little nodes of language cling, like and like to what will have them. The air framed beyond the high window is an invitation. I could grab something, sample the pie and salad. I could recite what I play at knowing, be disassembled by an institution or human person. Could get inside a tree and take up position as one who with her yellow eye stalks form. I didn't know I was looking for it, but sure, a chemic silver, a thought darting through another's wet plumage. Must I convene myself again? And it is mournful, the recognition of one's own phrase, a headless fish, width of some finger, writhing, cemented there. This is the first poem tentatively in the manuscript. I'm in that stage where I've just put everything into the Google document. And so now I'm like seeing how the kids are getting along at the party and who needs to be, kind of sweetly ushered out and who's chatting with each other. And this is the poem I actually have first, and it's called The Fool. I too long for a cradle of brilliant grasses, braided through with wildflowers, rocking on a historic mound that drinks the blood of men. Clots of irreverent sight, a shadow spills out of a pinprick in the form. Down below on the hill, the men gasp and gurgle until they are out, their weapons flirting in the sunshine, slick with insides, the grasses growing strong and toxic. So goes my life, a kind of proto-cinema applied toward the ultimate goal, passed down through generations of whisperers, liars, mothers, scrapbookers, and clowns to extract the alien life form that is desire and drown it. Do you know who I am? I have some names. You pick. One of them is Alice. One of them is Trudy. My name is Bunny. I'm called Pearl the Inheritor. Some call me the next one. My name is Went to Market, in case you didn't know. Hello, my name is Virginia. Actually, it's olive oil, Calliope's foolish little hyperlink, slightly drunk on the thin stripes of neon fat astride the tops of clouds. The sky is cold and unlikely. When I go on the airplane, I get all funny, start thinking about vessels, where I end and where light ends, what I contain, what contains me. Miss, can I please have some juice? 9 swallows of triple distilled vodka, 2 pink packets of sweetener, flicked vigorously like tiny bags of drugs, and bring me Dryden's Virgil, a roasted lemon, green ball of primordial fire, a cup of ice, and some nail glue. I know I can be hard to understand. I'm not exactly reasonable, and things can start to feel a little silly. I've forgotten exactly what. Hey, a strange feeling nuzzles my outline. I'm beginning to think that long ago I got stuck in a poem, your poem, and grew weary and lay down and slept and perished there. It's not entirely unpleasant. Bursts, itches of flowers, painting their lines, dividing up my things. I can feel them growing over me, covering me, entering me, even now. So part of this putting together the second book is kind of like a weird animal that I don't know what it is yet, because my first book, I just looked at all the poems I had written already and kind of put them together. And the second book feels kind of more like I'm constructing something. And I have a terrible tendency of not finishing poems and writing half a poem and then never returning to it. And so this poem is about that. It's called Daphne. This thing happens, you write half a poem and then stop at the first sign of difficulty. So you have all these half poems. The drooping heads of flowers you call lilies as a placeholder, stemless, waiting open-mouthed. To go back in and look on them is something horrible. Better to forget they are there, like the dream in which you know you've left your little baby all alone. If only you could recall where, and you're trying to stay positive. Was it under the pile of coats or in the closet? It needs the blue and meditative light that runs from your body. Its name, the name of a flower, Dahlia, Delilah. Oh, the pitiful thing must be somewhere, shriveling in a box, an atrophied pile of sound. There is a window, opens onto a field, opens onto a dance floor, opens onto a graveyard. Rachel, your most glamorous friend, muses that the present has become for all children an ambient gel in which the catastrophic and the banal ride at indistinguishable frequencies. She passes you a glass and soon Delia is only a nagging thought. You have worn the black blouse encrusted in sequins, the pattern venereal, pink, gold, blue. They flash as you twist your bones inside their fleshy and mostly biodegradable case. You repeat a movement that is like wilting at an accelerated speed to remind any onlookers how you once wrote poems. In one, there was a blender full of white glue, with a fly swimming in it, with a fly drowning in it. You could stick your hand in, press pulverize or pulse, but to what end? You've neglected the paperwork all your life. Beyond the door, the grass is wet, the lawn strewn with what you can't entirely say. This poem's about a spider. True story. I let a spider that was weaving a web in my kitchen hang out there for a really long time this spring until it met with an accident. But it was really amazing to kind of let it take up residence in my house and watch it make things. This is about a spider that doesn't make a web though. It's about a spider that kind of lives inside the bloom of a flower. And when the bug comes to the flower, it drags it inside the flower head. And they look kind of like crabs. I think they're actually called crab spiders. And they're really creepy and beautiful. And they take on the color of whatever flower they're infecting. Yay, crab spiders, says Amanda. Tenant, this poem is called. And my friend was like, you can't have the first word be crab-like. And I was like, I know, but it is. Crab-like, it uncloaks from itself, removes its own ghostly paper. A leg of mostly air remains in air. The hollowed onion skin bulbs where eyes once lay look out on the field, the din of it. A new body is painful. Exposed, it must retreat what was once inside, further inside. Globe perched on translucent needles, the articulated twin chooses tomb or home. It violates a form, bud like a fist, like a thought about to give out. There is a pink so clear and pale, a rose can't call it kin. A dwelling clutches close to itself. Its brief solitude before welcoming the traveler to crawl its repeating galleries, to wait in holy center. It drags the outside there. An environmental poem. I think to send pictures of the brick-colored ones, spotted and with stalks fatter than their little heads, to the amateur mycologist with the questionable beard. He told me to read a book called The Extended Mind, and how a bird's nest is considered by certain experts to be an extension of its brain and being, or was it its DNA? I can't be entirely sure as the great lawn stretches before me, waving me out until it is interrupted by the road, full of the ghostly trails of parcels and people and what carries them, each journey an underline that reinforces like a fattening braid of habitual fibers, its being there. How awful there is a road before me, how awful there is a house behind me, its bottles and food, dulling syrups, devices, its chemicals, the imprisoned plants and shapes of yielding plushness, paintings of the sea. Must one climb back into its clutches, the coverlet white and cloying as foam? The other option is to go somewhere, but that is where the lizard bitch lives with her rich stepbrothers, the floods, to carry her. I wear a silk garment studded with miniature islands receding into a turquoise ocean. Inside, the climate control leaps into action. A tracking number moans into my palm. Today, I have tried to make a poem, a trap of twigs and mud, where I am encased and decay. I press against the walls until they are curved by my curving breast, which pricks against the sharpness of what I've collected, producing little pains, open words, constellations that touch no myths, futureless calligraphies, until my robe is shredded, until the blood weeps down. So this is my meanest poem, this next poem. And I don't think people think of me as mean, but I can be mean. And so a poet on Twitter tweeted something, this is many years ago, a poet I really like and actually have no beef with, tweeted something about like, do poets really care about line breaks anymore? Like, why are we being so fussy about the line break? And I was like, I got so upset. And I was like, the line, and all I responded to this person is the line break is all I have, which is something that I really feel as a poet. It's kind of what creates the poem for me. And I write prose poems too, but I felt really protective of the line break. And so I wrote this kind of mean poem about this poet who I actually like very much. It's called Heaven, and it has an epigraph by Dorothea Lasky from her poem, The Poetry That Is Going to Matter After You Are Dead. And this is the epigraph. Take the things that you say because you can't write poems and figure out how to go write some. This poem's called Heaven. The line is all I have is my response to you. One of these poets whose hatred of their art rests so thickly in the mouth as to almost clog it. You who use poetry as a kind of signal, but don't write it, not really, and think we should all be writing pert little essays or etching swollen fields of hyperlinks or archiving a leak from 1976. Don't you know you could be speaking directly to the dead like this, like I can? I am doing it now. I can tell when you take a shit, your feet up on some low bamboo stool so waste can better fall from out your hole. I know you are weeping secretly into the spine of the age of anxiety. No worse, into Pound's fleshy back. The words grow wet and begin to stink. Listen, you skein of mold, you asbestos clown, you excuse, you joyless, sorrowless person. The line break is all I have in this world. It is the mother, the wave, and the undertow, the reconstituting cliff I will jump from my whole life. No matter how much I want to end, I end up right back at the top, staring out, face slightly perplexed by the machine that returns my gaze. Her eyelashes heavy with bees are often snow. I know inside the pore of this exchange, I will never die. I will just reappear. I will go out in order that I may come to, slipping under the anesthesiologist's mirror to swim the silver channel beyond recognition that waits for me just on the other side. I'll get shot out, gasping into a cracked grotto in which blue waters dance over the stones and moss. My hair, all in clumps, will soon dry. I am not even close to beautiful. I'm dumb, or numb at least. I've no husband nor a career. No children pull at my flesh, though heavily I am leaned upon. The break, the relentless coming of days, the do it again and do it now. This is my heaven. I leave it in order that I may return, wearing this very crown of asemic darts. Why dance with invention? Everything is here already. The snake you know escapes his former skin so that you may pick it up and drape it in the direction of your voice. Listen, can you hear that whoosh? That is language turning over. It makes a sweet sound, kicks up a scent from the dirt. It too is yours. You do not need any permission, certainly not mine. But you, poet, you know this already. And in the moment, balancing on the outer rim, you will give it up for no one. So, but the poem's also to myself. I'm the asbestos clown. The poem's also to myself because I was mad at myself for not writing poems. Globes, the title of this poem. That terrible autumn when I bled, I turned toward beauty like one turns their cheek into the advancing plane of a slap. The number and small address for a hematologist or two, brother docs at the same clinic, sprawled beneath the notes for a poem, a kind of symbolic grove, the harvest of red and brown globes glowing quietly, impenetrable under frost. My mouth was white inside the chilled landscape. I had been trying to think like a dead man, but was neither. So for so long went unthinking. A single red fox slinked its hungry form around the curve of my eyelid. It is now, I thought, that you must attend to the story of your unfortunate body. Hello, Dr. Allen. Hello, Dr. Dave. Will this vine that connects all with all, or most with most, or some with some, but not others, shatter when first I stoop to touch its frightening green? So I have a couple more poems. I'm going to read a short poem to John Ashbery, the one that John mentioned, and then I'm going to read a long poem. And the long poem is after the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto by George Balanchine. The poem is supposed to be a ballet in 4 parts, and it was commissioned by the New York City Ballet. And so they got me tickets. I went, I saw it, and I wrote this poem. And I think they were kind of like, what is this, when I sent it to them. I think they wanted a poem that was more directly about dance, more traditionally ekphrastic. But I was really thinking about what it means to be with others in a place. And that's what that ballet was kind of making me think of. It's an ensemble piece and a duet, and then another duet and an ensemble piece. So I was thinking about like that different scale of being with others. And I wrote it before the pandemic, but I feel like it has some pandemic energy. I guess I'll read that now, and then I'll end with the it's rather long. And So I will say that if you feel bored, if you zone out, if you find your mind wandering, that's totally fine. That's something I heard Lucy Ives say when she read many years ago, and it like blew my mind that someone would say that. And so I give you permission to zone out or let your mind wander while I read this long poem. It's called Ballast Trade. Oh, and when the New York City Ballet then commissioned my friend to write a poem for the same series, they had a page limit because they were like, why is this poem so fucking long? Okay. Ballast Trade, a ballet in 4 acts. 1, Toccata. If the group is modern, where are they going? Cutting across the field, up that coquettish hill, towards what? A city, a stone school built by workers where things go to be disassembled? Lines jut out from what we label. Little troop of joyous exactos, sexual in the checkered light of afternoon, beaming into the words we grasp at but ultimately forget. An activated zone where things go to be disassembled. Lines jut out from the urn, the string of glass beads, the stopwatch, an encyclopedia of ranked pills. I found the night to be hot, uncomfortably so, and so did what we all do, folded back a corner of the sheet so my feet could be free as Frenchmen, a stupid phrase I've never understood. The flower water had clouded, a pond of milk on the corner table into which the moon died incrementally. I was there where last I looked. Now I'm here. I'm not alone. What merges us to the journey, the movie, a liquid costume presents itself, and we stand while it encapsulates us, slowly but surely, a stupid phrase I've never understood. The flowing water was cult-like, demanded obedience. I attempted to rejoin the moving plot that had continued on in my absence. The group was on a hike, a tour of the history of montage, parading themselves through the woods, each phrase a casting off, a gesture as much about seeking as it is about letting go. Between the trees on which were projected thousands of scenes made up of smaller scenes. It felt organic, casual, yet impossibly constructed. Did the trees secrete these images? I saw no equipment. Stop it, said the soloist. You're overthinking. She placed her hand between my breasts, a gesture as much about seeking as it is about letting go. And I realized I had been one among women for some time. This will change soon, she said. A clearing dilated before us, a platter of painted grasses. I had learned of such spaces in books I'd neglected to read. They were essential to selfhood and being with others, something to do with true emptiness and sight, and how both were necessary in order to fully emerge as the opening chord pierces through silence. But was this the space made by us, for us, or did it just happen? Look, said a cousin, pointing to the center at a quarry hidden by tall flowers. Reflected in the water was a saying we all knew, something about being with others, emptiness and sight. I looked up from the italicized language to my surrounds. My friends were a semicircle of statues, frozen there in the clearing, kneeling at slightly different angles. Marble, exeunt, let go of my wet eyes. 2, aria. The countless spines of trees flare up against a dark backdrop. The man and woman bow to the sacred altar of the other's bow. The movement is more of an admission they are living in the same time. You are my contemporary, and in attitudes we have been similarly trained toward evasion and chance. I don't care, I say vigorously. Nor do I, you say, with an intensity of feeling akin to crowning oneself in the briefest garden, a tantrum of flowers at our feet. And it's easy to explain. You want to take my hand, but it has become property of the museum. Though I work against it, a thought moves in. So much is presumed, filled in by gossip among the senses. I fear I will always be tired and dumb, that I will never be released from the repetitions of men. My mother told me to change my earrings every day. Change your earrings every day, she told me. It seemed to me this was a sort of project or assignment regarding variation and choice. The ornament pierces where there is already a lack, so the act is more of a historical reference to a past violence than a violence in itself, a commemorative ceremony performed daily to the sound of smashed enclosures opening to greet the air. Where once I was wounded, now there is nothing but entry. The leg penetrates the circle the arms make. One day you asked me to haunt the back of my own knee, to picture the muscles of my legs and groin as plastic drinking straws through which lightness could be drawn up into a crown, to set the voyage of my gaze just beyond my middle finger instead of at the wall, its novel of peeling paint. One day you asked me to go on, to continue, to do it again, to push deep into the vertiginous exactitudes, always just out of reach. When I found I could not, I gathered quietly my things and left without ceremony. I became a different kind of person, part ghost, part sponge, a lump of pure refusal. Who extinguished the hot white frill that wicked life into life? Often the wrists are grasped so the pair may counterbalance. Often the courtly and ancient light is ground into the ground. 3. Aria. The truth is that it's all terrible, and equally so. It's just the matter of choosing which terrible to settle down with. This is the task from which we glance, and to be frank, I would rather be in agony than be even slightly bored. No, reverse that. The cartoon rat sits high on the lamppost, drinking a Miller High Life, whistling Jolene into the alley below. Weaving in and out of maroon black anguish and interstices of lightheartedness, the couple stabs the air with certain intensity. I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Do they move in a cipher, a kind of asemic pantomime of interdependence, precariousness? If I admit I need you in order that I may stand, may move, may hold my limbs so exquisitely extending like an echo emptying slowly its molecules into the middle distance, am I the squeaking weakling? On our walk to the quarry at the edge of the world, we saw trees choked out by vines. Knotweed, you said, an invasive species, you said. It poured out of the forest like many bitter fountains. I've seen the calm, limp drape of a limb harden into insistence. He rotates her delicately on her axis. She is at a slight angle. The first image that comes to mind is of a dead animal being roasted on a spit. More accurate might be the act of turning an egg or rock so that it is evenly warmed by the sun. To gently tilt and turn your lover towards the source of their suffering or their sustenance. Before you, I am both meat and material, a perfumed lozenge rolled around in the mouth to beat back the void sickness until I disappear completely. They are clipping along at a trot as if the sound of the forest isn't looming behind them, as if the stage isn't littered with dangerous holes. Rocks tumble into the quarry's center pit. We say at arm's length to mean held at a distance, but the length of an arm isn't really that far. Anything can be a distance. Even flesh to flesh can seem a canyon's thickening waist. I suppose the dimensions of an embrace become a measuring device. Her arm attempts an ultimate boundary it fails again and again to enforce. I fight against the likely true assumption that we inhale like a breakfast, that I am an impression and you are an idea. I would like to dress up as the idea for once, its stately slacks and feathered hat, for I too was born midsummer already dying, a fact I won't relinquish into this evening that presents itself like a fan before us, not without a fight. She moves herself within his gait. I'm not sure I would like to be a feeling platform either, nor to take up residence within the intimate contraption. When I say I need you to admit your helplessness in order to stand across from you, you palm the knots in my cherrywood knees. When you bend yourself back into unconsciousness, you take me down with you. I open myself to you, to the liquid field that approaches. I close myself again. Their movement is like a sad door. 4. Capriccio. The Great Hall has stood for hundreds or thousands of years. If we agree with what we have been taught by art, that all space is contained inside us, that we are not Mary Poppins, but in fact her magical bag, then is there nowhere for us to go? It is for this reason that we must enter as a group through the large arched doorway, that we must spear the breeze in faceted formation. Inside, the intoxication of moving in unison combines with the sweet, pointillist gestures of greeting someone you know as you approach them from across the room. When I first met my friends, I was delighted to be embraced by poets and artists. We were all in love with each other, and for the first time in my life, I felt I really belonged somewhere. We ate a lot of cheese and olives, crackers embedded with fruit and hazelnuts, and downed ice cold gulps of white wine from tiny, elegant cups. We watched videos and sang to each other, petting each other's hair while sitting on handcrafted stools and textiles painted with ancient pictograms. I was the youngest, a Pollyanna by nature, and the newest to the group, and I took up my place as a silly novelty, the role in which I have always felt most comfortable. Everyone was a genius in their own way and inspired the genius of the others. I took no lovers as none were needed. It was beginning to feel like something very exciting was about to happen. Pink horses gathering against the orange horizon, the choir inhaling in unison. You know how this story goes. Someone crushed a chrysanthemum into milk, a succession of minor betrayals. Z saw a horned beast and K's coffee crystals. The social braid we had created unraveled. I was forced to meet my friends individually, which was not nearly as fun or intoxicating. Crestfallen, I wandered around the windswept city like a child of divorce, taking pictures with my phone and buying food. My reversible arms still waved, my flippant limbs yearned for their core. And there, tucked into the tender folds of the avenues in their shops, I found I was truly alone. A dance instructor once asked me to picture a circle, a hoop the size of a large wrist that was half embedded in my body and existed half outside, the locus being my navel, like a planetary ring or the gimbal of a gyroscope. Standing, I was to imagine using the circle to draw in energy towards my center, from the air, from my surroundings, and then release that same energy out into the world as I invited more inside. When I moved, I could increase and decrease the size of the circle as needed. It could become as large as the room itself or as small as the pit of an apricot. I liked the image, but found the act to be pointless, as I was already breathing, a quite similar yet functional necessity. A devotee of the strange idea as a chance fleeting encounter, as opposed to a practice that is worked through and integrated over time, I hesitated to assimilate the kinespherical gadget. I now feel I made a huge mistake, but the attending sensation, like a dilating engine, a pump exchanging the interior with the exterior, cannot be retrieved. But isn't this living? As always, possessing something necessarily solves the problem of being without it, or so said Gilda, an advertisement for the mysterious pink box on which the black triangle was painted. Thanks, Vicky. I never knew it was so possible to be this sure of myself. Does it have a name? I don't know. It's just, I've never felt so impenetrable or so simultaneous in my whole life. A soft blow jostles the flesh at play. Back in the hall of cobwebs, the dancers are marking a movement much like the clearing away or harvesting of cobwebs. Garlands are strung up between the pillars. Piles of glistening food topped with small green sketches and the petals of edible flowers are served on platters resembling the reflective surfaces of mythic gazing pools. Mellifluous crossings streak the floor as deer and bison etch their desires onto fields. To be casual and yet precise is the near unattainable goal into which we dig our collective heels. All moments incline their heads toward us now with the expectation of a bloom. Sounds, appetites, tattered folders bursting with snapshots, a system of tonal or polar centers, postures of complete readiness. But the content is nowhere to be found, or when found is found to be harsh in its newness. We like it this way, a comb-like network of fences embroidered into silk. And what of this motif bubbling underneath us? The vaguely municipal odor of dust, wood polish, and decisions to be made encircles the first menacing note of spring. Fiddleheads unfurl through the dirt, and these tiles underfoot, they are beginning to show their cracks proudly like badges. If the sign could only make itself known, we could pack up, return home on the path through the hills. Until then, I'm afraid, even as the coolness of evening tempts us to expire, we must keep ourselves moving. There is nothing in this expression that should frighten you. One must admit that all this is not exactly clear. You pay perhaps too much attention to the notes in my mouth. The trees and daughters sound brightly tonight in the offices of difficult music. Thanks for sticking with me through that. You can imagine being the New York City Ballet and getting that and being like, what is this? I'm going to end with a very short poem for John Ashbery called No People in It, that John mentioned earlier. And lines from Flowchart actually made their way into the poem I just read, and also into this poem. And so, yeah, I'll raise my hand when it's Flowchart. No People in It for John Ashbery. I flutter in order to enter the phrases silver. Jackdaws have launched nearby. This time silk green and ripped, the movement a kind of chafing thinking. Oh, he's marking terrain right there with his unmade song. The shadow kids whip fronds, froth air up into heat, pure and simple violence of the eye. Wild iris ink wet in the margin stage. Well, hadn't this testament begun to carry its chime and stripes? That's when I knew he was going away from me, toward the sound. Like the ring on the table, it can't be decentered. Rim around the recent ashes, a bright tangled seeming. Thank you so much for coming tonight and listening.
Thank you so much, Emily. That's like phrases, just doesn't keep the same object. And I vote for heaven for first poem in the manuscript, but we'll talk about
really?
that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that in the 4-hour
Okay,
workshop
great.
of your poem
Thank
order
you.
that we're about to do now.
I will put it, I'll do anything you say.
Thank you, Dylan, as well, for those beautiful poems, and our two wonderful introducers, Kirsten and John. Please come back on the 20th for Benjamin Krusling, and then on May 4th for our own temporarily so, Karen Solie. Have a good night. Thank you for being here.